I certainly agree with that. And thank you for sharing that. Sheldon, welcome. You made it.
I made it. I made it. Sorry, there was some technical difficulties, but we're here now.
Um,
We're resilient.
we are resilient. Are we recording?
Yes, we just started.
We just started. Okay,
Yeah.
well, better late than never. So, what is your perspective on organizational resilience in the context of what we've been talking about, whatever part of the conversation you managed to catch?
Yeah. Very similar to what some of the others have said. One of the biggest things that I find in resilience is alignment and values. So if the company or the organization has very strong values and they're aligned in those values, then there's flexibility in what you can do as far as your actions. You can change your actions to meet the goals, but you're still aligned on what the actual thing that you're doing. So, for instance, we all survived the global pandemic. So that shows some resilience there. One of the things that we had to do was we had to pivot, but what our aligning goals was and what kept everybody sane was our goal is we're a wellness organization. So any way that we could bring wellness, it didn't matter if it was in person, if it was online. That was kind of how we had to think, because there was a lot of people afraid. I don't know if people will do this online. So we stayed aligned in our purpose, our values, what we're doing. We pivoted as far as how we did it, but our alignment was the same, and that's what kept everything together.
Fantastic. So it seems like the common thread is beginning to emerge, and that is the alignment of the values and vision, and that creates sense of purpose. If you act in alignment with your highest priority values, you feel like you're acting on purpose. And
Yeah,
when you're acting on purpose, the resilience becomes a lot easier to come by.
yeah. One of the things, just to add to what Sheldon shared there, is 100% agree that aligning the values, the vision, the mission, and things like that. But I think what's really important here is creating shared values, creating a shared vision and a shared mission. And let me just very briefly explain what I mean. I've been in many organizations and I see a mission statement on the wall. And I call it wallpaper because everybody walks past it. There's no commitment to it because it was created by somebody at the top of the organization, stuck on the wall, and they expect everybody to buy into it. And people don't. I always say to people, if you want commitment, it comes from involvement. Write it down. Commitment comes from involvement. If you want your staff committed to your values, committed to your vision and mission, they've got to be part of the creation of it. And although it sounds quite a lengthy process, the way that I've done this in organizations before, I start at the very top with the top team, and I get all the top team to write down, for example, their values, what they think is really important with regards to how they treat each other, how we work together, how we solve problems, how we treat our customers, etc. Then I get them in pairs to talk about and recreate a shared vision. Then get them into a group of 4 to recreate it until eventually there's one shared vision created by the senior team. Then the senior team, each of them go to their teams and do the same. And eventually the organization creates shared values, shared visions, shared mission, and everybody feels that they're part of it. So you can get that commitment from people.
Beautifully said. So in order to elicit commitment, you need to engage people. People support that, which they help create. If
Yeah,
they
definitely.
help create the vision and the mission statements, it will be much easier to expect that they will also follow through on their commitment. Makes perfect sense. Well,
Can I put a note on this one to what Bernard said? Because what I see when I'm working with my clients, and they can be leaders in the companies, I think the challenge here is, or our future work will be to because I agree with you, Bernard, but the challenge is that if you don't know as a person what your purpose is, then it's very difficult to buy into a company's purpose. And that's actually what we are doing a lot of work on, because people don't know. They understand, as you say, to the wallpaper. They understand that there is, yes, I'm here with a purpose. But if we are going into details, actually people are very confused about, but what is it actually? And then I think that the resilience is dropping, because if you don't know what your purpose is, then you will buy into a purpose that's not yours. And then you will try to manage and adapt, and then your resilience is away. So I think it must be a future work. And I call that, in my company, I call it the vertical work, that you know your own purpose, because then you can find a company, or you can be in a company which have a purpose that is almost like yours, because it maybe cannot be 100% fit, but it's not good to just jump in. That's just my note.
Absolutely. So in other words,
I'd love to jump in on that too a little bit. In my presentation, I talked about this phenomena happening where I would be working with organizations on creating shared values. And the biggest challenge is when those people do not know who they are. They have aspirational values, but they're actually not the values of those people. And those things can fall apart. So there is some frameworks that could be put into place to like really help people to get to know what their actual values are, not just the ones that they like or that sounds good or I want to be that, but what they actually are. And so that can help to really have alignment, which again will go to the resilience, because otherwise they'll fall apart when pressure is applied.
You're on mute, Lama.
Yes, I am. And pressure is applied in a variety of ways. Oftentimes, it's not a pressure that is done on purpose, like someone is putting pressure on you, the boss is pressuring you to do something. Sometimes it's a peer pressure. Sometimes it's just you're on the deadline, or sometimes you feel sick and don't have the energy to perform as you would like to. And so all of these, and there are plenty of other factors, you may have children and they're keeping you awake all night long. Who knows? And so basically all of these factors create a pressure cooker where a person has to figure out, well, how do I handle all this pressures coming from all the different directions? And also internal pressures, maybe internal pressures in the form of perfectionism, or in the form of feeling inadequate somehow, or maybe in the form of the internal critic. We often consider ourselves our own worst inner critics, right? So all this pressure is coming from all the directions, including inside, amount to a significant amount of challenge for some people, so that they start falling apart. And what keeps them from falling apart? What keeps them together? What keeps the Humpty Dumpty together, so that we don't have to put them together again? It's resilience. That's what it is. It's basically the ability to withstand the pressures, to handle the stressors without being overwhelmed. It's almost like there is a certain gauge of resilience, and it's similar to pain threshold. If the discomfort reaches the threshold of pain, we start feeling pain. Until then, it feels like, okay, it's discomfort, it's not comfortable, but it's not really that big of a deal. But once it crosses the threshold of pain, then it becomes like, ouch, that hurts, or we start trying to avoid whatever activity or whatever encounter brings about pain. And so the same matter of avoidance also exists in business. For example, salespeople often try to avoid uncomfortable conversations. Well, you cannot sell anything if you avoid conversations, or you're afraid of negative responses to your offers. And so that basically is an invitation to play with our threshold and either increase or decrease it on purpose. Now, why would you want to decrease it on purpose? Because you become more sensitive. You become perhaps more empathetic. Now, empathy is nice, but then it also decreases your resilience in terms of ability to withstand challenges. So sometimes you also need to ratchet it up. As you're increasing your threshold, the same issues don't cross over the threshold. In other words, they are uncomfortable, but they're not like causing you grief. And so essentially what we're looking at is also self-mastery. I will be exploring that in my presentation, obviously, tomorrow, but I would love to hear more about that from you folks, if you have anything to say on that.
I'll just add to that. You asked a question about what is resilience, and I think my experience has been that many people, individuals and organizations, when you start talking about resilience, they see it as a massive undertaking, and that's often what will put them off. Because if you were to talk about personal resilience, that encompasses physical well-being, physical resilience, eating well, drinking water, sleeping well, exercising, building cellular resilience through hormesis, all these things. And there's emotional resilience, psychological resilience, which is peace of mind. And when you talk about that, it just seems massive. And when you talk to organizations about building resilience into the future, they're already busy, and it just seems like a massive undertaking. So I think one of the things that I encourage individuals and organizations to do is to embrace the concept of continuous improvement. Make one small improvement every week. Adopt the PDSA, PDCA cycle, plan, do, check, act, and just keep making those small improvements. It's based on the philosophy of what great sports teams do. They just make small little incremental improvements between one Olympics and the next Olympics. And it's the difference between lots of gold medals and no medals at all. And I think if you can sell it that way, if an organization or an individual can adopt the principle of those bite-sized improvements over a long period of time, those little improvements build up to real in-depth personal and organizational resilience.
Would it be fair to say, I'm sorry, I interrupted you, Bernard. Okay. Would it be fair to say that you can only improve that which you can measure? And if so, how would you measure resilience so that you can make those incremental improvements? Natan, welcome.
Thank you.
I think that's quite a challenge. For example, one example could be, however, is that if, for example, you mentioned difficult conversations earlier on, if that's something that's a challenge to me, and it is, because my personality type is I'm a people pleaser, I don't like to upset people. So if there's a difficult conversation to have, I would rather pretend it doesn't need to be had, even though I know it does. So a measure could be that I stretch my comfort zone. My challenge this week is to say, I'm going to have one slightly challenging conversation. It may not be the most critical one that I need to have, but I do that every week for the next 3 weeks. And I've stretched my comfort zone, and then I feel more comfortable to have that really difficult conversation with somebody that I know I need to have. So that could be one measure, that you actually set yourself a goal for an improvement and you've made that improvement. But I think it's with health, especially physical resilience, it's difficult because it happens at such a subtle level, doesn't it? If we change our lifestyle and eat more healthily, start exercising and things like that, it's so subtle. We don't necessarily see a big difference in a short period of time, which is why people give up on healthy eating and things like that, isn't it?
Indeed. Natan, I'm grateful for you to make your way into this gathering, into our discussion. We're discussing resilience, obviously, organizational resilience at that. And we were talking about what resilience is and how to make incremental but consistent improvements so that it doesn't feel like a massive tsunami of change, but you actually can make it more sustainable. What is your perspective on that?
I love that. And even on a personal note, I had a good 5 attempts to come into this room. And each time as you put up your lights, you take down your lights, you take down your microphone, you take down your sound. Oh, email. Let's get back. Oh, look. So going through those wonderful ups and downs was the beginning on it. If we're talking about it, let's say more on an organizational level, I'd look at organizational resilience as that muscle that lets companies weather disruption without losing their identity so that they can keep their momentum. It's a living system, not a static plan that you update.
Okay, so in the context of incremental improvements of resilience, what's your take on that?
That wonderful book where if you only improve 1% a day, you're 37 times better at the end of the year. That's a great way to look at it. I love the small incremental changes, but I also love that if you'd set intention before so that you would purposely look for those small little changes. And then when you'd see them, that would reinforce that muscle. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I see more of them. And the more of them you see, the more of them you want to see. It's a beautiful process and system. And it just starts with that one person smiling at somebody else, that one person, random acts of kindness, reaching out, doing something in some capacity, just selfless.
Cool. And so my question for Bernard, and maybe you can also chime in on that. The challenge with that is measuring something. As they say, you can only improve that which you can measure. So what is your way of measurement of resilience?
In an organizational context, or are we talking about, within an organization? I think some of the things that we've spoken about already, for example, what Sheldon touched on, shared values, shared vision, mission, those sorts of things. A measurement could be that we do a survey now on how bought in people are to the current trajectory of the organization. Then we do a shared vision, mission, values exercise, and we do the same survey in, say, 3 months' time. And if we find that there's a lot more clarity about the direction of the organization, where we're heading, and a more upbeat tone to the direction that we're heading in, then we've measured an improvement. So it's it needs. I do the same with employee engagement. I'm a big advocate of, we can only get to the future that we want with engaged employees. So I give an employee engagement survey. So do this now. Then we'll do a number of team briefings that will engage the employees and make them feel part of something. And then we do the same survey again at the end. And if the score is much higher, then that's an improvement. I use a very simple, you're probably all aware of the wheel of life that's used in coaching. I use a similar sort of concept for employee engagement. It's just got like 5 key aspects of employee engagement. So a before and after measurement of whatever area it is that we're aiming to improve on.
Cool. Sheldon, what would you say about the improvement? As a technologist, especially, you know more about measuring things than most of us.
Yeah, there's a technology that people are very familiar with. A lot of companies use it, objectives and key results, or OKRs, where your teams align with the goals and objectives of the organization, but they have to measure it. So they have to have key results, similar to what Bernard was saying. have to set a baseline. That's always the hardest part, is setting that first baseline. Sometimes it's arbitrary the first time you do it. And then the second time you actually have real data that you can utilize to say, hey, was there a change? Did we improve customer satisfaction by 10% or by whatever measure it is that you're trying to achieve? And then the incremental change, that's a huge part of software development is we do iteration. So now software is no longer developed where you just have this one package. It's always iterating. They're always updating. You're always seeing some kind of new update on your app. And that's because of the methodology that's being implemented. Is always we define what we want to do. We organize the teams. We do the work. And then we retrospect. How did that go? Did this go well? What could be done better? And then we keep doing that process over and over and over again. And incrementally, we get better. The software gets better. The user experience gets better. And then we always are taking feedback so that we can stay agile. And most of the things that we're making changes are not ideas that we have in our head, but it's actual feedback that we're getting from real people.
Right on.
Can I can I just ask?
Yeah, please.
Because that is brilliant, especially if you wanted to look at it quantitatively, because you need to. If you don't measure it, it doesn't get managed. If we wanted to look at it qualitatively, I would look at like the resilience triangle. So I'd want to look at energetic capacity in an organization. I'd want to look at its cultural adaptability, and I'd want to look at its leadership intentionality. So that if we're missing any of them, you're gonna be vulnerable. And if you wanted to get your people riled up and go from I had this idea, and then the idea turns into, okay, you know what? Now I've clearly got a vision, and then you share your vision, and now it turns into a mission, and then your mission turns into a movement, and enough people get into it. Now you have a cause. So that's where I think that momentum can really start from. Before we quantifiably measure it, is there a pulse? Is there a buzz? Is there a less of the metrics and more of the feeling? And then, of course, you need the numbers. Otherwise, how do you know it's working? So, yeah.
Right on. Cool. Malina, you've been muted for a while. I wonder if you would like to chime in, if you have anything.
Yeah, I would take the word from Nathan there, because I also was thinking that I know that in our old world we are measuring a lot, but actually I noted before I came here that I was writing here from measure to meaning. Because what I think is very important, I'm an energy ninja actually, and what I would like is that in the future, if it's fine for me that we measure, but what's important for me also is that we learn how to use the energy, not only as persons but also in the companies, because energy is our bricks to making everything. So if you can teach people how to feel the energy, because if you have fear or you have people that are not confident, then you are lowering your energy or the frequency, and then you are not making the results as good as you could have done. So for me, it is everything to know what is the energy in here, not the physical energy, but the vibration in every people here. So if you can measure that I don't know, but you can ask, how is energy, how is meaning, how is creativity? Because if you can get that up, then you have a lot more resilience, I think.
I agree.
Very well said. I think we all agree. We, in one way or another, we are all involved in energy work. I'm a Qigong master.
Yeah.
Sheldon is a Kung Fu master. Nathan is an energy coach. Bernard is a master in his own right. And Jeff, you are also an energy being.
Yes.
you are kind of a fly in the wall in this conversation. I would love to peel you off the wall and see if you can share with us what your perspectives are, or if you have any questions, suggestions. That would be fantastic to hear.
Yeah, well, like I said, I just recently retired after being with the company for 35 years. And I was, when the company started in 1990, there were 3 principals, a bookkeeper / secretary, and myself. And I was very blessed that the 3 principals in this company demonstrated all of these principles of resilience that have been discussed here. They had vision, they had adaptability. In 1990, in the energy conservation field, you know, we kind of started out, well, we'll do energy audits for various buildings, companies, whatever. And at that time, there was very little of that going on. The energy crisis was kind of over at that point, and so we needed to adapt. And the principals adapted very well into different areas, still energy and energy conservation related, but there was a huge adaptation that went on and has gone on over the last 35 years. And they treat all of their employees as people, respect them. Whenever we would hire new employees, we would do very detailed and extensive interviewing to make sure those people were had consistent values and interest in what the company was doing, and wanted to go in the same direction and have enthusiasm for that. And you know what it did, you know, it was a small company. I don't think it ever got more than maybe 25 people, employees. We did work with many subcontractors on large contracts. So we dealt with a lot more people than just our own employees. But the principle all followed through. And one thing I'd like to say is what resilience does is it does create community. You know, we had a community in our company, you know, they still do. I still kind of call it us since I've been so recently retired. But it builds community, it builds a lot of respect and communication. Since our company was small, you know, and over the years, you know, it was originally the feedback and reviews and everything were just done by the president. And then as we got a little bit bigger, we changed some of that. And now a lot of the managers are assigned other employees where there's regular check-in, like monthly check-in, and to see how things are going, if there's any problems, if they're not excited about the project they're working on and they would like to go another direction. So there's this huge resilience in developing this cooperative community. And, you know, one thing I guess I would say is that in a small company and with the right leadership, that works really well. In a large company, that could be much more challenging, where you would maybe need to break things down into smaller departments or subcategories or groups of people in order to maintain that resilience throughout. But it's been a real blessing for me to end up with this company for so many years with such a resilient leadership.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. It seems like I would have to chime in. It seems like when we experience challenges together with others and show resilience and overcome the challenges, sometimes successfully, sometimes something doesn't even get overcome, we still persevere, or we still manage to somehow pivot. And if we do it together, there's a sense of camaraderie. And camaraderie, to me, is like a crystallization of a sense of community. It's nice to have a sense of community. You come together and everyone is happy to see you. But camaraderie is like the brotherhood. It's like, I've been through all kinds of shit with this person, and I've done all kinds of unthinkable things with that person together, and we've survived. Those people who survive, like, I have military background. I was in special forces, and I survived a number of challenging situations. And those people who you do it with, who you survive some stuff with, you create a sense of camaraderie with. In other words, you will be happy to be in the same foxhole with them. You will be watching their back, and you trust that they'll watch yours. And when shit hits the fan, you know that they're not going to run away screaming because they've been tested. So in a sense, that's another aspect of resilience that few people seem to talk about outside of the military circles. And that is how valuable challenges are in that capacity. They not only develop grit, but they also develop the sense of brotherhood. And that's something that I certainly see possible to create or recreate on purpose. In other words, that's one of the things that I'm planning on doing with my Resilience Center, is to take people on wilderness adventures, take people on adventures where they have to persevere certain challenges, or put them through some challenge courses, or teach them some martial arts, and basically create this situation that is, it's not like a boot camp, but in the sense that that's what the purpose is. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I'll just add to that, if I may, and because I think the challenges in what you're sharing there, Lama, is being able. I resonate with what you're saying, because I used to be in the Royal Navy here in the UK, and that camaraderie, that sense of togetherness, and everything seemed to be part of the fabric. And it's been able to recreate that in a commercial organization. It's kind of what Jeff touched on as well, and I'll just share a little case study of a company based here in the UK that are only 6 years old, and they've grown from 1 employee to 80 employees. And the founder, the managing director, right at the very outset, his theme, his vision was to be a constructive disruptor, or the words he used was to be a positive disruptor to the industry that they were in, the construction industry. And part of their recruitment and everything, that was paramount to everything. So they would only recruit people who could buy into that, and they were prepared to put their head above the parapet and say, we are going to do things differently in our industry than how it's been done in the past, because we can see a very different future. And I believe that their phenomenal growth has been for many reasons, but 2 big reasons. One is their customers look at them and say, this is a company brave enough to do things differently, and they support that. And they have also brave, courageous staff who are prepared to take a risk. And there's they're not reckless in the risks that they take. But the MD says, as long as we get 80% of those risky decisions that we make to do things differently and better, we will continue to grow. And that's kind of been a part of what they've done to create that. So I think to be able to take that military kind of camaraderie, togetherness into a commercial organization, there needs to be that kind of theme that everybody can buy into. And then you need to have it in your policies. You need to have it as part of your recruitment. It needs to be, excuse me, communicated at every internal meeting you have. It needs to be communicated externally to customers. And it becomes your DNA. That is us. That is what we are about as an organization.
Fantastic.
Can I comment on this one?
Please.
because what's popping on in my head when you're talking about this is what I call it in my company is identity work, because a lot of or some of the important things I'm working with my customers on is that it's integrity and it's confidence. And I don't know if it's the same, Lama or Bernard, but I think I will say it anyway, because if everybody is on a personal level trying in to do things for the highest good with integrity and confidence, because I can rely on you and you can rely on me, and I know with myself that I have an integrity. I will do what I promised to do. I don't know if it could go do it in the same way, Lama, but I think that a lot of this is also identity work, because I will get more resilient if I know that I can rely on myself, because then I can also rely on the company, because we are all in the same integrity. Just a thought.
It's interesting hearing different approaches to doing very similar things. One of the things I think about is, there was a talk about the mission statement. There's a talk about like doing exercises with people in order to get that feeling of camaraderie, or even like we've been through something, or even psychological safety to create risks. One of the things that I think has been really helpful is, when you're doing your day-to-day work, your everyday ceremony, how do you create that? How do you create the camaraderie in the regular meetings that you have? How do you create a sense of something bigger, or even sensing the energy in the room, or addressing the energy in the room on those very simple, basic things? That's the thing that makes you feel like, oh, there's a continuum of this. It's not just this thing that they say on the wall, or the thing that's there, but how is that expressed in these very mundane situations? One of the things that I've had to work with a lot in leadership with people that I'm working with is a lot of people are afraid to ask questions. They feel that they'll get beaten up for asking questions. And so one of the things that I really work on with people is psychological safety around that. And that will also help when we start about taking risks. It's not about like that taking a risk is bad. It's that we're going to measure how well this did, and you're not going to be in trouble if it didn't do well. What we're going to do is we're going to work from there, and then we're going to figure out all the ways that it failed and fix it. And you're going to be a party to that. You're going to witness that. And so those are some of the things that I think help to do that as well, like on a very fundamental human fabric level, not just from a analytical kind of perspective.
Well, interestingly, you mentioned that people were afraid, or might be afraid, of being beaten up for speaking out or asking questions, or maybe disagreeing with some value statements. And I think that's a measure of resilience. If a person is afraid that they hold back, or they, instead of speaking up, they keep their mouth shut, they are demonstrating how they're lacking resilience.
And that has to be addressed. I think a lot of people are suffering from just literally educational trauma, what they got in school, what they got from their parents as they were learning. And so they got taught how this whole thing. So there's a lot of work that we have to do with people emotionally, psychologically. Like it's a part of running an organization. So it's not just, these measurements. Those measurements are cool, but they don't work. They break down if you like literally take the human part out of it. So that's, organizations are just bodies of people working together, and you're going to be dealing with every single thing that they have. So it's really, I think it's in the interest of the company to actually create the type of environment that they want. But you can't do that unless you've done self-work. So people that are on the leadership team, they have to do self-work, or else they're going to bring all of their stuff into the mix, and it's going to poison the pond.
Yeah, I think, just to jump in there, Sheldon, I 100% agree with what you're talking about. And I can think of an organization I worked with some years ago, and part of their leadership development, they wanted to create a feedback-rich culture, because they realized that individuals grow when leaders and managers can give them constructive feedback, and the organization can grow when you get feedback coming up from the staff all the way up through. But you've got to create the culture conducive to that. So the managing director, who was a very forward-thinking guy, he said, right, we'll roll this training out, but he said, I want to create an environment where anybody can give, as long as we follow the process of being able to give constructive professional feedback, anybody in the organization can give anybody else feedback, and they have to be receptive to that feedback as long as we are following the protocol of that being constructive and professional. And that created a real culture change, because it evolved from the managing director. He had done some of the personal work that you said about, and I actually did some work personally with him and giving him feedback and seeing how well he could accept it. And after a period of time, people felt safe to actually go to him when he walked through the shop floor and say, boss, I'd like to give you some feedback about how we could do things differently. And they had a culture where that was accepted, and the organization grew. We actually had a conversation in 2023, and they said, you know what, if we never created that sort of environment, I don't think we would have got through the pandemic. And it was because they were able to create that open, honest, feedback-rich culture where everybody in that organization felt comfortable giving anybody else feedback and having those open and honest conversations. There was pain getting there and some difficult conversations along the way, but the pain was worthwhile.
Yeah, and feedback is not always pleasant. Sometimes it may come off as criticism, or maybe it's intended as criticism. Sometimes feedback is hard to swallow because you realize you screwed up, and people are basically telling you, look, this needs to be done differently, or whatever you did didn't work or caused harm. So owning up to their own actions is one of the traits of highly mature individuals. Not everyone is there. And as Sheldon put it, a lot of people have trauma. As a matter of fact, I'm reading the chat here. Tivo, who I think has left the room by now, but he left an interesting question. How do organizations respond to integrate and process the trauma that's both on the inside and in the environment? It kind of plays right into this conversation, doesn't it? And trauma. I don't really like working with traumatized people, because I personally feel like it's hard to undo trauma, but some people manage to help others undo traumas. And I know, Natan, you have done some work with people at a rather high level, including some Cirque du Soleil acrobats and folks like that. Well, those get traumatized a bit, both physically and emotionally and otherwise.
I can tell you, well, if we want to, tell me if you can think of something more traumatizing than you're an 18-year-old girl and you're in a harness and you're being hoisted up 18 feet in the air and you're working on trapeze, and the guy below that's holding the rope, he's your backup, he's your spotter. His job is to just hold that rope to make sure that, you don't fall 8 stories to the wonderful concrete below. Oops. Rope slips through his hands. He tries, but you hit the ground. You live. You don't break anything. You somehow stayed calm enough and relaxed enough to go through that. We work together. We get your confidence back up. We get your energy back aligned. You go back up. Harness. Different person. You go back up 80 feet, go for the trapeze, miss, and once again, slip through the hands. This time when you hit the ground, you're not so lucky. And you get hurt. And now you don't know if you want to do any of this anymore. That is trauma. You know, and it's quote unquote your job. You're paid as an acrobat, but it's also your life. You know, this wasn't on a show. This is in practice training. So when your organization is fundamentally different and people who align with it realize that corporate culture is just basically a fun way of saying, oh, I'm like that too. Cool. If Sheldon and I would go for a beer and a barbecue together, we're together. That's corporate culture. And if we can get more people like us together, this is going to be one heck of a beer and a barbecue. And if all of us can collectively feel like, you know what else besides the beer and the barbecue that we're both very passionate about? And then all of a sudden an idea comes and you run with that. So there's so much beauty in that all of these things, and you know, I have a 15-year-old daughter going on 30. If you have one, you know. I tell her once in a while, look around and literally look at absolutely everything around you and show me one thing that didn't come from somebody's imagination. This is all man-made. Somebody thought of all of this, the pen, the pencil, the thing. Somebody thought of all of this craziness. It's just somebody's idea turned into fruition, turned manifest and made real. And if we're looking at that level of wow, well, then you have to respect everybody in the organization. The janitor could have the greatest idea since sliced bread, change the whole damn company. But if you're not open to that because corporate culture says we don't listen to the janitor, Cirque du Soleil used to have parties. Wow. When they'd come up with a new show, they would have conceptors, people that would concept a show. And so they'd lock them, and this is back in the day, they'd lock them in a room. You bring in like pizza and Chinese food, and that's it. And you stay in this room until you come up with the theme of a new show, period. Could take minutes, days, hours. Nobody knows, nobody cares. Before we go in, we're having this white witch come by with sage and bless this. Now, if you're not down for that kind of woo-woo in corporate culture, you may not want to be on that board. But that's why he picked all those people to be there. He was a street performer. And coming from that...
You mean Le Liberté?
Yeah. Yeah. So the beauty of when you go down, and I don't want to turn it into a Cirque du Soleil story, I'm just saying the people there, they live, breathe it, they audition it. If you're not, you know, you can't ride two horses at the same time, don't join the circus. Like you need to be a gifted son of a gun. So if you're doing that, why aren't you really owning that and standing in that power, that truth, that personal alignment, that you are a pretty special person? Here you are, you got accepted. And the cool part is that if you haven't won an Olympic gold medal in gymnastics, then why did you audition? But the most magical part to me is that congrats. Now that you're here, this is what you're good at. But here's what the team needs you to do. Do you know anything about makeup? Do you know anything about stage presence? Do you know how to sing and dance? No, I'm an Olympic gold medal gymnast. I'm like, perfect. So up here, when we need you to do the triple twisting, triple backflip, awesome. In the meantime, go learn stage makeup, go learn dance, go learn theater, get part of the group. Only as strong as our weakest link. And awesome that you can triple flipping, triple backflip. That's awesome. But that's about 30 seconds out of a 3-hour show. What about the rest? And that's a microism of a lot of organizations on a macro.
Cool. Thank you. All right. Well, any questions, any comments, any suggestions, folks?
Well, I just would like to say, as we've been going through this, I've been kind of starting as a short list of kind of resilient management characteristics.
Mm.
And so, and this needs to be on all levels of management, not just, the top level, but they need to be respectful of all the people they interact with. They need to be compassionate, because people might be going through all sorts of crap that may be affecting their performance. They need to be open to new ideas, feedback, and therefore adaptable. And they need to be supportive of their people and whatever they're going through and the work they're doing. So that was kind of my little short list that I just kind of came up with while during this discussion, but it may be worth putting down somewhere and adding to.
Awesome. Yeah, and I would even add to that that ideally leaders are the ones who walk the talk the best, or they demonstrate through action that they are resilient and adaptable, and also they have other values, whether it's sustainability or creativity or innovation or other values that are associated with the particular corporate culture or organizational culture that they aspire to create within their organization. And those who embody these principles, these qualities, these traits are most likely to be the best leaders. And the ones who talk the good talk, but don't walk the talk, usually are not going to be great leaders. They're going to be susceptible to falling apart themselves when shit hits the fan. And of course, what can you expect from your team or from your company?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, unfortunately, I had that modeled for me in the leadership in the company that I was part of.
Okay. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, folks. Great conversation, great exchange of ideas and perspectives. I hope that you all enjoy our entire collection of presentations, because as VIPs, you have access to all of them. Now, as VIPs, you have lifetime access to all of them. Don't wait till next year to watch them, because next year we'll have more. So I would encourage you to do two things at least. One is to go through those presentations and watch them, taking notes or taking mental notes to the self on one hand. And on the other hand, please get engaged in our online community. We have a very nice online community now of people who are interested in resilience, people who are motivated, who are curious, who are perhaps struggling somewhere. And so your participation in that community will be both very welcome and appreciated. And also you may come away with some nuggets as well. So please do participate. Any final words of wisdom, anyone?
I think
I
this
guess
is very
the only thing I could share, I started off by saying that, organizations need to be prepared to have those difficult conversations about an uncertain future, but aligned with that, have a vision of a future that organization can be sustainable and resilient. And just to add to that, one of the conversations that never seems to take place, whether it's politicians in organizations or individuals, is the fairy tale that economic growth will be there forever. You know, I can't think of anything else in a finite world that can keep growing forever and ever and ever. And I just encourage organizations just to have a conversation around that, around, you know, when the economy of the world has reached its peak, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Just have that conversation. Be prepared. You know, don't be one of those organizations that fall by the wayside because they're not prepared for those sorts of things. And I talked about vision. Make that vision of a future compelling. Make it so compelling that everybody in your organization, a little bit like that case study of the organization I mentioned over here in the UK, all their staff buy into it, their customers buy into it, and they've got a vibe within that organization because they've got a compelling vision of a new future in a very tricky world. So that's my end point.
Awesome. Thank you. So hope for the best, envision the best, but prepare for the worst. Awesome. Any other ideas, guys?
I'll give you a quick endpoint. If you're looking for the fastest, easiest way to put on a different set of glasses and filter and look at Susie from accounting as something different than functionally in the company, what does Susie provide for you and how do you need her and how that value adds? And if you can remember that Susie's somebody's mother, daughter, sister, that Susie may be going through some personal stuff. And if you can look at her as a human and not just Susie from accounting, I think it'll change the way you start to think of and speak to and relate to all the people in your organization.
Very nice human touch. And of course, that also will be subject to change once we have more and more robots joining us in the workforce, right? That's going to be the topic of our next conversation, maybe not on Saturday, but on Sunday. I think it's going to be fun. Great. If there are no more words of wisdom, I would like to wrap up. Unless someone wants to say one more word of wisdom, if anyone, please raise your hand now. No words of wisdom? Okay. I will look forward to seeing you tomorrow. If you want to join us for another panel discussion, obviously I'm going to be seeing you, Sheldon. You'll be joining us, hopefully. And also want to thank you for taking this time, for being a word, the voice of resilience in this world. I think more people like you are needed. So I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Lama.
See you soon.
Thanks, everyone. Lovely to meet you all. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all.